Hello, beautiful people, and welcome to Beyond the Veil, a podcast on psychic protection, spiritual hygiene, and navigating the ebbs and flows of the healing journey as you learn to master both your sovereign and shadow selves. My name is Lauren on Earth, your host, and I thought what better way to start 2025 than a few episodes diving into ancient texts, Christ, Jesus, the Bible, all of it. We're going to start today with the Book of Enoch, then make our way into the Old Testament, the New Testament, the beliefs around who Jesus was and what happened during that time, all of the conspiracies around the Holy Family, Christ consciousness. Again, we're going to be breaking this up into a few parts, but we're going to start today with the Book of Enoch, which, predates the Bible. And just a little disclaimer, I am not claiming to know everything. I don't know everything. I am uncovering the truth just as everyone else is also working to. The thing is, we are blocked from the truth right now. And a big part of that is the systems that are in place, all of this separation, this disassociation, this muddling of the truth that has happened over a very long period of time. And we're not quite there yet. I know I am a wisdom keeper, which basically means that my soul has agreed to safeguard this ancient information because the information, this ancient wisdom has had to be protected and kind of kept, secret and separate from the masses because most of the people on this planet at this time are receiving distorted teachings, and the truth is there, but it's buried right now. And I know I'm still protecting it because I know that if it does become public knowledge, it's very likely that it will still get into the wrong hands, and that's not good either. And we're just not ready as a collective. Our channels are so blocked. There's so much distortion. None of us really know the full truth. So for anyone telling you that they do, it's definitely a red flag. We're all looking for it. There are healers and people on the spiritual path and truth seekers. And, there are still these unhealed wounds and ego, and it's still getting in the way in the channeling for a lot of people. And, especially a lot of the truth seekers, they're definitely doing the work, but not the deep enough shadow work to be able to really see things clearly, which is why my focus has been clearing my channel, clearing all of as much as I can of the distortion in my mind, my body, that also caused me to see reality through a very pessimistic lens up until the age of 24. Most people have not done that deep enough shadow work. And so there's truth coming in, but it's still a bit skewed. And so I feel that I'm learning how to differentiate God's truth from my truth, from your truth, or, the other person's truth. There are a lot of question marks still. And I will be honest as we kind of go through this series of what I'm still not sure about, what feels like truth to me, and so on. And I actually sat with peyote a couple of days ago, and again, just being in these ceremonies, because it's been several months, almost 7-8 months since I sat with plant medicine. And it always just blows my mind, like how much bad energy is there everywhere in every part of the body and the consciousness. And I know I'm not the only one. Like I can't be the only one, right? So, this blocking of the truth doesn't mean a little bit of clearing here and there. And, we are really, really blocked from the truth, from God, from ourselves. And we're going to figure all of this out together, right? We're going to uncover the truth together, but everyone has to play their part. So when it comes to the Bible, I don't feel necessarily, because it's very metaphorical, right? Maybe it wasn't meant to be straightforward for us because this is part of the game. We have to come back to the truth through this maze of this warped, skewed information by listening to ourselves, knowing ourselves, humbling ourselves, not letting ego and greed and the other deadly sins have this control over us anymore. And it's a process that we are in, which, kind of goes back to how is there so much dark energy here and why is it taking me so many years to move through? And it's just this acceptance of we're in it, we're here, it takes time to even get to this point to be able to unravel it. And we just need to be here now with what's right in front of us and face our own demons. And the whole collective consciousness needs to do this. Like, yeah, we don't know the full truth right now, and that's okay, but we will, and we are uncovering it. And so my advice is to just observe and kind of hear what everyone is saying, not take anything as full truth, and allow yourself to move through your own process in uncovering that. So most of you know this by now, but Christianity and the teachings from Jesus are not the same thing. I believe there is one true God, and there are a lot of phonies, a lot of entities or souls who desire so strongly to be God that they've convinced billions of others that they indeed are. And one of my best friends, she does makeup for celebrities, and we were having this conversation once about these people, about, them being reptilian, but she's like, but they do love God. They talk about God all the time. So maybe they're not dark, or how can that be? And the answer is very simple. They do have a relationship to God, but to their God, not one true God. They call their God, God, but it is not the God. There is one true God. And that's the first thing I feel to be truth, like full truth, one true God. And that this God is all loving, is love. I feel that in my heart and soul, but not everyone is worshiping that God. They're worshiping what I like to call God with a little g. There are many of those, but there's only one God with a big G. And in the book of Moses, there's this part where Moses is showing the power of his God to who they believe, it doesn't say exactly, but was Ramses II, an Egyptian pharaoh. And Ramses is realizing that Moses' God, the Hebrew God that he's communicating with, who he also believes is the one true God, is stronger than his God. And not only stronger than the Pharaoh's God, but stronger than all of the little gods put together. So Moses, we'll get to this in the next episode, but was trying to free the Hebrews from being enslaved to Ramses. For example, during the plague of flies, right? Because the flies were just multiplying and multiplying, and Ramses would call on his god of fertility, but that god was also not powerful enough to stop it. Nobody could stop the plagues, and more powerful than all of the other gods put together. And you have to remember, during the time of Egypt, they worshiped many, many, many gods, polytheism. And part of the sole mission of Akhenaten, who was Pharaoh, who attempted to get everyone to worship a single god, which they called Aten, or the sun, which represents the source of all life. Obviously, this did not go over well. This was highly controversial. The people did not want this, did not like this, and in return did not like him, and he did not reign for long. But he closed many temples of other gods, especially the god Amun. You could pronounce it Amen or Amun. I'm guided to say Amun, who was at the time in New Egypt, the New Kingdom, one of the most powerful gods of Egypt. And his name, Amun, translates to the invisible one or the hidden one, which I think is, a little weird, because in the Old Testament, the name for God, the creator God, is spelled YHWH, and it literally sounds like a breath, like And a lot of people now say Yahweh. That's a story for another day. I'll kind of get to that in a minute, but it makes sense that God's name would be an inhale and an exhale and not called the invisible one or the hidden one that just appears in the new kingdom of Egypt. But that's just me, you know? So Amun was considered the creator god, but only rose to power in the new kingdom. I think it's safe to say, in my eyes, he is not the one true God. He also called himself King of Gods, which is not very humble of him. So Akhenaten, possibly hearing the voice of one true God, because that was his mission to spread that message. Well, if he closed the temple of Amun, the real creator God, the one true God, why would he have done that, right? So Yahweh, I'm going to talk about this in the next episode because I feel that, basically I feel that there are people who are worshiping this God Yahweh. And when I see these people talk about this God, I feel immense darkness in them, around them. But then I'm like, but that's the name of the God in the Old Testament. Like, that's God's name. So why is this such a stark, vast contrast to me? And there's this drama that happened on TikTok, I want to say maybe a year ago, of this girl. She's, psychic, a healer, basically coming out and saying this man, this musician who's supposed to be spiritual, is attacking me, psychically attacking me, and taking my sexual energy and messing with my sexual energy. He denied it, of course. And a lot of people, took sides, but I believed her. I'm like, no, I see that. I see that in him, because you can tell the people that carry a lot of sexual energy, and you can tell the people that also carry a lot of distorted sexual energy and that don't have boundaries. That's very leaky. I think living in Tulum, it's everywhere. So maybe for me, I can spot it maybe a little bit easier. But he had a dark energy, and I'm like, I can totally see, because he's not integrated, right? Like, when your shadow is unintegrated, you don't know what's happening in the astral and really what you're connecting to and what entities you're connecting to, because you're not allowing yourself to go there. So was he conscious that he was doing this to her? I don't know, but it was, I saw it happening, maybe in other realms, other dimensions, other aspects of his consciousness that maybe was aware, maybe not, but it was happening. And, a lot of people didn't like the way she handled it, whatever, could have had a conversation with him, made it very public. But he is now back. He is a musician, and he worships Yahweh. And this is where I just got really confused, because I was having a conversation with a friend the other day, and it really shifted something for me, because he was telling me, he was like, do you think that there is a different God being spoken about in the Old versus the New Testament? And I'm like, maybe, because Yahweh, this God figure, entity, demon that I see, is not the one true God. And like, maybe the Old Testament is talking about this Yahweh that is not God. But I've really been thinking about it. And the more I think about it, I do feel like the, original Bible, not the version we have today, the original Bible is God's word. And I didn't get too deep into it in the peyote ceremony, but it crossed my mind. And the message I got was, yeah, it is God's word. And if there was a dark or false God in the Old Testament, like, it just didn't feel possible, because they wouldn't have the power to do that. Like, the infiltration of the darkness came after. And the original Bible is God's word. But again, don't take my word for it, So what I feel like I kind of know right now, or, what's on my mind right now, is I believe there is one true God. I believe that Jesus was speaking to one true God in the New Testament. I am leaning more toward Moses and Enoch were also speaking to one true God, but like, there's a part of me that just still isn't quite sure. I feel like they were, but that's the thing too. Like a lot of people are saying it's not, but I think those are the people that are caught up in the distortion of religion, because I see that pattern. Um, and then I feel like the gods of Egypt were clearly not the one true God. And a lot of them were actually pretty dark because, you think about Mother Mary, she calling herself God, she's a powerful ascended being with very strong God codes, but she's not calling herself that. And I see more of God in her than in most of the Egyptian gods and most of the whatever people are worshiping that they claim is Christianity. These dark beings are narcissists through and through, so it's, to me, it's just like so obvious when this ego. So anyway, back to Akhenaten real quick. A few years ago, because I feel like he's a really important figure in all of this, he came into my Akashic records and I had never heard of him before. But I was kind of being shown that despite his reign of power not being very long and the task he was guided to complete being almost near impossible, the purpose of all of this was not to shift out of polytheism and into monotheism necessarily, because of course that will not just happen overnight, but to imprint this into the Akashic records for us to remember, to return to, and for this to be written in our history. And it's interesting with him as well because he was married to Nefertiti. I can't tell you how many dark people think that they are her, claim to be her incarnated, including this woman that I used to see actually kind of regularly from my ex-mentor's meditation studio in Venice, go figure. Who I've later realized was openly practicing like black magic and sex magic. One time she said, if there is a spirit who wants to have like sex with you and like touch you, to let them. And like, I remember we were on Zoom and my friend in the class was texting me and she was like, oh my gosh, like, what do you think of this? And she was explaining how like she was letting this entity like touch her boob and then the other one. And I'm just like, yeah, this is not my thing, not for me. But then later on was realizing like, yeah, she practices like dark sex magic, right? She also thought she was Nefertiti, among others out there who are maybe open about it, maybe not. But again, anyone claiming to be a reincarnate of any ascended master, the real ones are not saying it, you know? So also Akhenaten's son, King Tut, we all know King Tut, who actually after his reign said, yeah, no to everything my father just did and reinstated polytheism back into the collective, which, to me kind of in a way feels like a betrayal. And it's just this battle of light and dark, the light wins a battle and the dark counters, then we counter, then they counter. And it's gonna go on for a while, you guys. And I know I haven't spoken about Egypt on here yet, but when I was there, I realized very quickly that, the new kingdom of Egypt, post-ancient Egypt, with the reign of the pharaohs, the kings, was a lot darker than I thought or previously knew. The pharaohs were not communing with light. And when I was there in the ancient temples, they did not want you meditating, worshiping, doing any sort of communicating with these gods and goddesses, even like Isis and Osiris. You had to be sneaky about it. And sometimes we even got yelled at for it. Not in every temple, but in the ancient temples, you can definitely feel the innate magic and the power and the precision and the love and the one true God. And the temples that were then overtaken by the pharaohs and then built up, you could feel that they were pulling on that energy of the ancient temples. It felt parasitic, and you could also very clearly tell they were reconstructed using slave labor. You could feel the imprint, like it's like those souls that were slaves, like imprinted that into everything. And you could feel it. It's parasitic. And you could feel the hunger for power, their greed. And it was truly a night and day difference. And I was feeling the energy harvesting. my point is these pharaohs, most of them were very oppressive, very greedy, thought they were, the bee's knees, thought they were gods. And when we were at Valley of the Kings, even at Karnak, we felt this dense and heavy energy. I felt the pain of the souls who were enslaved, and me being one of them, because I touched a tomb of the Pharaoh, and I felt this cord, and I was like, I am still enslaved to this Pharaoh. It was a very crazy experience. But the ticket only allows you to go into 3 tombs. And by the way, the Valley of the Kings is where the pharaohs are buried, so they can be worshipped and remembered forever. And this was probably the most packed, the most people by a long shot out of all of the places we visited. I literally said, I'm like, oh, this is where every tourist in Egypt is, because we were there during off season. It wasn't that busy, but just a few people in the temples. But Karnak, Valley of the Kings was so busy. And you could feel that black magic over this place, like pulling people to ensure that they are still being worshiped and are still harvesting energy there to this day. And we go into Ramses's tomb, and this guide there kept asking, we asked him, please leave us alone, no thank you, wanted us to go touch the tomb, and was like, do you want to worship, do you want to pray? And we were like, haha, no thank you. And he was like, no, you don't want to worship? And I was like, well, I don't really worship anything, and I'm definitely not worshiping a dark figure. It was just very interesting that they pushed for that at the Valley of the Kings, but then, at Osiris's temple earlier that day even, or maybe the day before, we were forbidden from even just sitting quietly. Like, we were just sitting there. We were not invoking anything. We were not doing anything, just sitting quietly, taking it all in. And our guide got in a yelling match with the security. And so, with the new kingdom, these temples, there were still carvings and paintings on the wall of Hathor, Isis, all of the gods and goddesses of that time. But it was really clear that they weren't like genuinely loving and honoring them. It was out of like not having a choice and doing it out of fear. And this was also confirmed by one of the guides because we asked about it. And so, yeah, just very, very interesting. And also when you kind of put the timelines together, kind of realizing that, okay, Moses' story happened at the same time as the new kingdom. And I'm going to share a couple of dates. Listen, are they accurate? I don't know. But just to kind of put into perspective how much time between, because right now I am focused on the story of Enoch, the story of Moses, and the story of Jesus. Those 3, I don't know why it's like that, but we're just going to go with it, So Enoch was estimated to live around 3000 to 3500 BCE. His life predates the flood in the book of Genesis. Moses was estimated to live around like 14 to 1200 BC. He brought forth the 10 Commandments, and then like I said earlier, he freed the Hebrews from the control of Ramses. And then Jesus was born 4 to 6 CE. So just putting into perspective that there are, thousands of years between these 3 key players who all, believe they were speaking to God, to one true God. Enoch, who is he? He was the great-grandfather of Noah and a 7th generation from Adam, the first man. So long story short, he believes he is speaking to God, the one true God, was taken to heaven and shown the mysteries of creation, the workings of the cosmos, and the future judgment of humanity. And he acted as a mediator basically between the fallen angels or the watchers and God. And I'll get to all of that in a moment. But he was entrusted with this divine knowledge to record God's plan for the world, to teach humanity about morality and divine justice. And there are 5 parts to the Book of Enoch. There's the Watchers, the fallen angels, and the Nephilim, the cosmology and the heavens, divine judgment, the Messiah, and the history of humanity. And the Book of Watchers basically details Enoch's interaction with God, angels, and basically the events that eventually lead to the Great Flood. So the story is that a group of 200 angels called the Watchers were tasked with observing humanity. So according to Enoch, they were appointed by God, the God that he was speaking to. And the Watchers were led by these prominent angelic figures. And the chief of the Watchers, their name was Semiyaza. And so there was this rebellion of the Watchers who were led into temptation, basically enamored with the beauty of human women, and took them as wives, mated with them, basically violating God's divine order. Anyway, the Watchers and the woman then produced offspring known as the Nephilim, who are described as the giants who were violent, cannibalistic, and destructive. And speaking of cannibalism, by the way, side note, I saw this channeler say that she was remote viewing the Pope and what he was doing during the holidays with the Jubilee, which we'll get to in the next episode, with these portals. And she said behind those doors, she saw like disgusting things, cannibalism being one of them, and also involving children. And it just rang true in my whole body of like, I never thought of that, but like, I think she's right. But anyway, then we have the introduction of forbidden knowledge. The Watchers basically imparted knowledge to humans that violated divine laws, teaching humans sin and destruction and how to use weapons and adorn themselves with cosmetics and jewelry. That's not necessarily a bad thing, but in that way leads to vanity and violence and, self-worth and all of that. And Semiyaza, the chief watcher, taught sorcery and enchantment and divination, aka black magic. Others introduce astrology, the knowledge of the stars, the weather, herbalism. And with all of this information, humans became more violent and wicked due to the information imparted by the Watchers and the influence of the Nephilim. So at one point, then the archangels, Michael, Gabriel, Raphael, and Uriel, were witnessing the corruption and asked God if they can intervene because they sit, in the throne of God. And I know there's so much confusion around the archangels. I've not been sure for a while as well, because there are false archangels. Like, I cannot tell you how many people think they are praying to Archangel Michael and they are not. But I also have seen, I've seen Archangel Michael, I don't want to say in his true form, but close enough. Like, it was very powerful. And I'm like, he's real. I feel it. I see it, So I do believe ultimately, yeah, the archangels, they are real and they are pure, but there are demonic spirits who are mimicking the archangels as well. And they are taking their name and forging that identity. And it's not, there's a disconnect there. And for me, I felt like at this time, as I'm reading this, I feel like the question for me is, why would God appoint these watchers, these angelic beings who clearly were not ready and not evolved enough to not stray from temptation of beautiful women and stay on task? And if you think about it, these Muslim religions where they blame women and make them cover up because they can't resist themselves, it just sounds really familiar. And, Allah, I don't think Allah is the one true God. I don't feel like all religions are connected to the one true God. And, also having been in a Muslim country where you hear the prayers go over the loudspeaker and it just changes the energy of the whole place. It darkens the energy, and this cloud comes over everything. And, because I still didn't know, like, I didn't have as clear of an understanding when I was there. I'm not super tapped into Muslim teachings and the religion. I know of Allah, but I'm asking myself the question of what God, capital G or little g, are these people talking to? And when I'm making this connection with the watchers, it's like blaming the women. And even with the Muslim religion as well, it's like it's the woman's fault if the man has temptation because she's existing, pretty much. And that is like a real belief that people have. And so anyway, it kind of brings me back to this question of God appointing these watchers and it really not going over so well, of was this a mistake? If this is one true God, did he make a mistake? Can God make mistakes? Was humanity ever supposed to get to this point, or was this all intentional for the purpose of soul growth and for all of us who need to go through this process where God is and was and is always guiding, but was never meant to stop it altogether? So is it free will and divine testing? Were these watchers tested with their free will as overseers of humanity to obey and remain aligned to God's will? And I mean, aren't we all going through that on a much smaller scale? Like, isn't this whole game a test of, can you stay connected to the one true God even amidst separation? Can you recognize the one true God even despite all the distortion and the challenges and the temptations? Because for most people, they cannot recognize that energy. But again, this is why they call it Earth School, right? Like, this is why this place is such a test, because the watchers made the choice to rebel, and God also had to uphold the principle of free will as promised. But it is not going to go without consequence, and it's a lesson for all of us. The Bible also emphasizes that God's purpose and decision for all of this it's beyond human comprehension. The vastness of God's plan is very limited with our understanding, and it's not our job to know and logically understand. I feel it's our job to be okay with the unknown and to feel and trust and surrender, and we will get there, So maybe God's decision to appoint the watchers, despite the failure, if you could even call it a failure, like, I feel like you can't, because God, I feel, doesn't make mistakes. One is showing his commitment to free will and has given us multiple core lessons, including responsibility of power, humility, morality, and the unfolding of a much larger divine plan that we just don't fully understand right now. And so it's paving the way for humanity to go through this process too. And this book also talks about Judgment Day, which I believe is very real. I feel like I understand karmic law, not fully, obviously, but I spent a lot of time trying to understand it. And I do feel like ultimately you will be responsible for your own energy, for your wrongdoings, your crimes against God and humanity. You will be forgiven, but not without a process of healing and changing, this your core self to align back to the divine energy and learn from your mistakes. So ultimately, is there a judgment day? Yes, I do feel that there is a judgment day. I don't know what that looks like. Is judgment day every day? In a way, yeah, I guess it could be. And this is what the book says, so kind of take it with a grain of salt, because again, the translation and, this book is not full truth. There are obviously things missing from it. There have been edits. We know that it's, they've gotten into the wrong hands. The truth is in us, right? And again, I keep broken record, I keep saying it, but we're gonna uncover it. It's like it's stored in our DNA. Whether or not these texts have been corrupted, they could not tamper with the original blueprint, but they have tried, and they've done, bravo to them, props to them, because they've distorted very deep and they've distorted a lot. But that truth there is truth that they have not been able to touch just yet. And it's going to make a little bit more sense as we kind of get deeper into telling the story of this book of, what's going on in the heavens and so on. But, essentially in this book, they say they are condemned for corrupting humanity and essentially bound and imprisoned into this deep, dark pit to await eternal punishment on the day of judgment, which, sounds extreme to me, where it's, eternal punishment. But again, the translation of the words is probably not exact. And then the Nephilim, the way it's been interpreted in the Book of Enoch, is they were destroyed physically, but their spirits basically became disembodied and fragmented. And there are these are the demons that are spoken of in later traditions. So this fragmentation happened where they were not completely destroyed. Are they the demonic entities we deal with today? Some of them are, yeah, definitely. According to the interpretations of the book, the Nephilim are cursed to roam the earth and are these malevolent spirits that now plague humanity and are hungry for what they had as giants, but are now fragmented, disembodied, lost, and restless. And I feel that Judgment Day, is not just limited to Earth, it's the entire cosmos. And in the book, it says, after judgment, the earth and the heavens are purified and divine harmony is restored. And I know we know that day is coming, right? I think we all know deep in our soul that it eventually does come. It's just not really anytime soon. Like, we got a long journey ahead of us. We're just becoming aware. And so, yeah, in the book, it's described as, on earth at least, the final removal of evil, that no being, human or angelic, is above accountability. And maybe, that's why everything happened according to divine plan with the Watchers to ultimately teach this lesson, because it's the ultimate demonstration of God's justice, a world free from corruption and evil, and the punishment, being torment and fire cast into the depths of, despair, the annihilation of their spirits. It feels a little extreme to me, because I feel like, forgiveness is possible for everyone, but again, not without a journey, not without, going through this karmic process. But if that is true, which it could be, if the translation is correct, sorry, like, I'm with God on this one. I don't feel bad for them. They have, you get what's coming to you. I don't know what more to say. It's just karma, And I keep saying this too, like, for anyone that has wronged you, and I mean really wronged you, like my ex-mentor has, like, it will come. Their time will come. They will suffer. It's karmic law. They cannot change that. They are not above that. And that is what this book is telling us. And it's not up to us when and how and where and why with the karma and the retribution and the justice. Let it go, leave it up to God. It's coming for them, whether it's now or later. The Book of Enoch also talks about the Son of Man, who existed before humanity, chosen by God, which we also know is Jesus is, right, called the Son of God. So is that the same soul? It's very possible that it is. Many people also talk about the reincarnation of Jesus coming soon, and I just don't think so. The term it's the second coming of Christ. And to me, that just means Christ consciousness through all of us, not that, a person is coming back. But it's possible. So Enoch then talks about how he was brought to several heavens. And the first heaven, he says, he saw ether and he saw a sea greater than the sea on earth, which, if you guys listen to the last episode, which I highly recommend, that describes the firmament that was being talked about in that episode, the oceans above and oceans below. Then he says the angels took him to face the elders that rule like stellar and cosmic order. And he saw, again, 200 angels that rule the stars and are in service to the heavens. Then he went to the second heaven and he was shown darkness. He says, greater than earthly darkness, and saw prisoners awaiting judgment. And I'm going to read you guys this quote that I feel is kind of, I don't know, it just stuck out to me. So he says, these okay, so Enoch asked who these souls were that were awaiting judgment, and they said, these are God's apostates who obeyed not God's command, but took counsel with their own will and turned away with their prince, who is also fastened on the fifth heaven. And it made me think of, I was having a conversation with my friend the other day because she's just having a hard time understanding why there's darkness and why it can't just all be light, and if, God created the darkness and it's all just God and it's all just light. And I'm trying to explain like yes and no, right? And I think I've told this on the podcast before, but for anyone new here, I feel God all the time, everywhere and everything, right? But there have been a few times in my life where I am face to face with this pure light of God. And one happened a few years ago. It was during an ayahuasca ceremony. And I was like, I have questions. I have so many questions. And the first one was, how do I learn to love these dark forces? Because I just can't. Like they are inflicting so much harm. Like, how do you expect me to love them? And his response was, well, I love them because they are me and they are also a reflection of you. But they have turned their back on me. They have turned their back on themselves. They have turned their back on, all of it, God and themselves. And they are a manifestation of what happens when you separate, when you disconnect, when you decide that you no longer want to be connected to this energy, God, the creator. And so you stray from your heart and you begin to develop these behaviors that are out of alignment. And so, this quote just makes me think of that as well, because they obeyed, they disconnected, and they decided to take, counsel with their own will and, turned away. So the third heaven is described as lush and vibrant, this lush and vibrant paradise, and the souls of the righteous basically awaiting their resurrection and their time with God. And it's interesting to see how it's like a lighter realm, a darker realm, a lighter realm, a darker realm. The fourth heaven, this is where there's more governance of the celestial bodies. This realm is the sun and moon. And also he was shown how the cycles of the sun and moon are governed by angels, and there are angels who also oversee the natural order. Enoch says that he measured and compared the light of the sun and moon, and that the sun's light is greater than the moon's, which I think we all kind of knew. And this is also where he encounters the phoenixes. They live there as well. The fifth heaven, again, this is where the fallen angels are located in punishment. And the sixth heaven is more divine order, more structure. This is like the weather patterns, the seasons, the elements. And then the seventh heaven is God's throne room, or Polaris, if you listen to last episode, which I highly recommend that you should, as well as the highest ranking angels, the archangels that I spoke about a little bit earlier. So obviously there's more, but this is the gist. But yeah, don't hold me to this. I'm sharing my thoughts, my opinions. I'm telling this story as it's told in the book. But a lot of it does feel like truth to me. I mean, it makes a lot of sense why war, oppression, vanity, vain are so deeply ingrained in us, because I used to think, where did we learn this and how? Those sayings that you hear of people like, oh, babies are born pure, and humans are born pure. It's like, well, not like necessarily. And like at one time, most of us were, yes. But again, the distortion goes so deep. And I feel like the Book of Enoch talks about this, the moment in time when the tables started to turn a little bit, and where the that seed of separation really started to manifest through these angels who essentially turned their back on God, which is exactly, what he said to me in the ayahuasca ceremony, because, it's like I'm also looking at all of these other beings, right? Like the reptilians, and I'm like, they're all the same. Like it's all the same, a different manifestation of the same energy, because I feel such a similarity as well to like reptilian and fallen angel. So yeah, all just really fascinating, interesting. So yeah, I think we'll stop here. We're coming up on an hour. We'll get into the New Testament next time. Thank you guys again so much for listening, supporting. I really, really, really appreciate this community. If you do love this podcast, and you feel the call, please rate, review, subscribe, share it with a friend. Actually pay money to keep this podcast going. I am not making anything on this. It is definitely a deficit financially, but I don't care. I know that this is needed. I know I am tasked with, sharing this information in as much of a loving and neutral and unbiased way as possible. And I love doing it, but, just any way you can support me, just like double click on social media, and just sharing it with friends is really, really, really helpful to just help me get this information out to the people who are meant to hear it, because you know how hard it can be on social. So a few announcements, a couple exciting things. I will be announcing a new class. It's all about working toward sustainable abundance. So many people are out there, teaching these get rich quick schemes and black magic coded abundance courses. And I'm creating my own abundance in a much different way. And yes, it's slower, but it's rooted in something so much deeper. And, it's like, yeah, the earth is abundant, but even more than that, the earth is balanced. And a lot of people are missing that crucial piece. It's not about accumulating as much money, possessions, vacations, trips, like, this, I create my own reality. It's like, no, you're forgetting about God's plan. Like there's more to it than that. And I feel that, it's often through this lens that disconnects us from true harmony. So it's 4 weeks designed to, help us explore some of the shadow, our karmic patterns, but really to reconnect with that balanced abundance and open ourselves up to these authentic abundance codes that I feel blessed to have access to. I mean, I started this path with negative thousands of dollars. And, that has obviously changed. And, that's why I feel too, like just keeping my prices really fair. I see a lot of people doing these group courses and charging thousands of dollars. I mean, there's one that came across me recently, $11,000 for a program that she took this class with another teacher who allows you to use her program, but it's just a copy and paste, and charging 11 grand. And I'm just like, this is stealing. Like, this is not God. It's not about like charging as much money as you can and making as much money as you can. It's about really making sure that what you are offering is an equal exchange to what is being received. And I hear things, with a lot of these group courses where they're not receiving, as much as they feel, right, they should have, or the codes that they are bringing through are not often as strong. So they're being charged $4,000 for this course, but they're barely feeling the codes and barely feeling the energy. And it's, probably partly because that person doesn't have a strong enough of a connection to these codes, and the container is just way too big. And the exchange is just really uneven. So they might be, bringing in that abundance now, but it's not sustainable. So I'm really excited. It's going to be beautiful and perfect and a great way to start the new year. So expect that to launch within a week of hearing this podcast, if you're listening to it when it comes out. Also, for those who want to receive updates from me who maybe miss emails or stories, I'm going to be sending out texts. I will not spam. It's just a couple texts here and there of, hey, announcing this, hey, last call for this, and so on. Some discounts sprinkled in there for all of my, my core community. So there is a link for that in the show notes if you want to sign up to receive texts. And lastly, I'm starting to think about 2025 retreats. I posted this on my stories the other day. I am definitely being called to Egypt, whether that is October of 2025 or I'm thinking maybe February of 2026, because I'm also really wanting to gather everyone in Mount Shasta this year as well. Just like a smaller, more intimate retreat. I feel like my community is building and I'm seeing people become friends and like texting each other and talking to each other and like helping each other through these processes. And I'm getting emotional because I love to see it. And I know that community is like such a big piece that is missing for so many. And I really want us to all come together in person and hopefully more than once this year. But I'm taking requests because I want to hear what you guys think. If you think Mount Shasta is easier and better for you, and if you're still interested in Egypt, but you're okay to push it back a little bit. So before I start planning and really getting into all of this, like please, if you're interested, let me know what works best for you. All right. Love you guys so much. Thank you again for supporting me, for being here. I'll see you guys in 2 weeks for part 2 as we get into the Old Testament. And I hope you have a beautiful day, night, wherever you are in the world. Okay. Bye, guys.